Monday morning to everyone here at the Rivers Edge Radio Network. Today is one of those rare days where we sidestep my show to talk about a new show coming to the network. And I have Mr. Erik Germesin of the Element Church, which is our neighbor right down the street here in studio. And he is the host of the Element Church podcast, which is coming to the Rivers Edge Radio Network. Hello, sir. How are you today?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I feel like this is the meeting of community people here here in the Rivers Edge studio. I know Element Church is an awesome church here in Millvale. They are our neighbor, as I said, right down the street here on North Avenue. And the reason why I say it's two community people is because Element Church is a big part of the community outside of just being a church. I know they've also been very awesome with the Millvale Music Festival and lending chairs and helping us with posters and things like that. So they kind of go beyond being a community resource as a church, and they actively engage in the community in multiple aspects, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so tell me about your name.
So,
Germesin, because we were talking about that
Germesin,
before
yeah.
we went live, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
So, my last name, Germesin, is a pretty unique one in the United States. There's actually only two, me and my wife got stuck with it when we got married. Germesin, it's so unique in the United States because when I'm actually the son of a German refugee, and they were fleeing the Nazis during World War II, and when my family got here, they all changed their names. So my dad was born Wolfgang Germesin, which is a very, very German name, and he changed his name my grandmother changed his name to James Perry, and when my brother was born, my brother's Jason Perry, but then my dad wanted to go back to his birth name right before I was born, so he changed his name legally back to Wolfgang Germesin. So I got his last name, and my brother got a different one. So now there's just since my father's passed on, it's just me and my wife in America.
Now, does that make for complicated family reunions?
Yes.
Yes. And did he go through extreme vetting to get into the United States?
I don't know the detailed stories of it, but I'm pretty sure the Germans were fairly screened before they came in during World War II.
There we go. So tell me about the podcast, the Element Church podcast. What is unique about this particular podcast? I know I've had a chance to listen to it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good addition to the Rivers Edge Radio Network. But tell me, in your words, what is unique about this podcast? Why are you excited to bring it here to the network?
Well, I'm excited. At the Element Church, we're firmly all about being in our community and for our community, and so I think that our podcast offers some unique perspectives from our perspective as a church on how we can be involved in our community, both in physical, tangible ways, but also the spiritual aspects of that go along with it. I think that as a church, in many ways, we're different than what people expect. If you ever wander by our building used to be a melon bank. It wasn't built as a spiritual edifice, as most people would think. We don't have any stained glass, and in fact, in our main room, we have a vault where we keep another pastor who's a friend of mine.
Keep him locked away until you need him.
Right, exactly. But oftentimes when people visit Element Church, are like, wow, this is a lot different than what I expected, and the things that you talk about are different than what we would expect to hear about as a church. And we try to be very, very practical and very, down to earth on, hey, what is, if we're reading this passage out of the Bible, how does that actually affect what we do on Monday? Mm-hmm. We don't want to have anything that we do be just about, hey, we're going to get together on Sunday and be kind of a club. Instead, it's all about how do we live out what we believe every single day of our lives.
Well, the podcast, too, is more modern as well, which is something I think you see in your church even when you first see the building. As you said, there's no stained glass windows, but even beyond that, your signage, it looks fresh, it looks new, it looks modern, and I think the podcast also reflects from that as well. And that was one of the reasons why I was kind of excited to bring it to the Rivers Edge network, because the River's Edge is always trying to push that envelope and try to be modern, and
Sure.
and we're aggressively always trying to look at ways to be modern. We want our content to be fresh. We don't want to seem old-fashioned. And that's one of the things that I liked about your podcast. I kind of wanted to bring something like that to the network. So when my business partners, Sarah and Tom, who are parishioners of Element Church, mentioned the idea, and I immediately was interested just knowing what you guys do. And then when I heard the show, I thought it was a great addition. So I think that was kind of a cool thing to bring to the network. And why did you decide to come to the River's Edge network? What opportunities does that bring to the podcast and to the church at large?
Well, I think it's a huge. It's always a great to have any sort of a partnership in the community, and since River's Edge is such a great thing in Millvale, to partner with you guys is just not only is it kind of fun, but it's also great. Any guy who is a preacher likes to be heard.
Sure.
I don't think you get into my line of work unless you like hearing your own voice.
Nor do you become a talk show host without liking hearing your own voice.
Right, fair enough.
Having that, yeah.
And so any time that there's an opportunity to get to share with more people, that's something that I really appreciate. And I like using more modern ways to do that, as you talk about. Like, we have, in addition to being on here, any message that we have is available online. We're actually working on being able to stream our services in video. And those sort of things are really interesting to me. Part of that is because for years I was actually the technical director for a larger church in California.
Okay.
And so that sort of stuff is always kind of right up my alley. And I'm also just a good old-fashioned nerd, bit of a gamer and things like that. So that side of things always appeals to me as well. But we definitely... as we're a big part of this community, and so is River's Edge Radio, I think it's a great partnership for us to be able to get things out there and say, hey, this is what's going on at our church, here's what's going on in our community, and here's ways that you can be a part of that.
Does it provide you an opportunity to maybe reach people who would not necessarily be able to be reached through the church because you're in a different medium, you're reaching a different set of eyes, a different set or different set of ears, I guess in this case.
Right, and absolutely, and it's a digital world now. Most people, before they visit a church, are looking for different digital ways that they can engage to find out, is this something that I would want to be a part of? Is this someplace where I would be comfortable at? And this is another way for people to get to hear about what Element Church does and who we are before they ever would be like, hey, I'm going to set foot inside of a place. Because for a lot of people, that's a very uncomfortable experience, right? It's because you don't know what to expect. Maybe you grew up in a different kind of church, or maybe you've never even been to a church, and you're like, what's this all about? It gives people an opportunity to kind of put their foot in the door and say, okay, well, what is this nerdy guy that I see a picture of on the webpage? What does he talk about?
Well, that's true. I mean, people like to research things before they go to something. People do everything digitally now. I'm
Absolutely.
kind of a dinosaur in the sense that I still go to the store and shop for things, but even like that, everyone, they've got their Amazon Prime accounts, and they just, as you mentioned here, we have an Alexa in the studio. She's not on, so
Don't set her off.
Yeah, she usually will talk back to us. So.
Well, and and it's very true, because like I don't go to a restaurant without looking at the menu online. I go, okay, well, here's a restaurant. I'm going to look at the menu. I'm going to see the food that they offer. I'm going to go to, I don't know, Yelp, and I'm going to say, okay, do people like this restaurant? If everyone says, don't go there, it's horrible, I'm not going to go there. It's definitely in that sense, any organization, whether it's a nonprofit, a church, a restaurant, a business, has to be aware of the digital world that we're in today, and how do you put yourself out there in such a way that people are going to be interested in whatever it is you're offering.
Now, tell me about your journey. How did you come to the ministry and go from being into a tech position into a pastoral position, into a ministry position?
Well, I've been doing ministry as a pastor since I was 19.
Okay.
So my technical position was also a ministry position. If you've never known anyone who's worked in a church, most people in churches wear multiple hats. This is also true in any nonprofit, because there's always more need than there is money.
Or a startup profit.
Or a startup, yeah.
Or profit, yeah.
And so I've served in various aspects for years, but I've come to Pittsburgh 7 years ago. I originally grew up in Southern California. The first question you always get when you say you moved here from Southern California is, why would you do that?
Well, I imagine that there had to have been a lot of prayer for strength, leaving the beautiful weather of California to, Pittsburgh's it's a nice place, but let's be
Yeah.
honest, it rains and it's dreary. So
It is very the rain, the dreariness that takes a while to get used to. But there's
An eternity?
countervailing points. A lot of Southern California people just watch television and they think it all looks like San Diego. And really, a lot of California, especially coastal Southern California, is chaparral land, which is functionally desert. That's why you hear about all the droughts over there. I've been telling all my family that I'm just going to bottle rainwater and send it to them. It's gotten better, but a lot of where I grew up in Lompoc, California, in a little valley town, it's always in a drought. It's always kind of brown. If you're on the coast, it's actually more dreary than you think, because you have something called the marine layer that comes in every single day, and it's foggy and it's overcast for a lot of the time. And so people sometimes think California is something that it's not, because of television. But that being said, we knew we wanted to go out east and we wanted to be in a larger city. And we visited Pittsburgh first and we really loved it. We like how green it is and all that sort of stuff. We like the communities that are in Pittsburgh. I always said that Pittsburgh is the biggest small town I've ever been a part of. It kills me in a metro area of about 3 million people that I can drive 20 minutes, walk into a store, and run into somebody that I know. I'm like, when I lived in Dallas, that did not happen. But for some reason, Pittsburgh's such a big, small town, and I really love that about it. And then getting to be a part in Millvale is even cooler, because Millvale is just a small town. In the middle of all this urban sprawl, I'm a part of a small community that's really awesome. But we originally moved to Millvale, and we were like, hey, we moved here to start a church. Startups, you're familiar with that
Yes.
process. It's something. And we ended up attending Element Church while we were in the process of getting ready to start our church, which we called Mars Hill Church and was in Lawrenceville, which is where I live. And so we were at Element for several years, and then we started our church in Lawrenceville. And we started that church, and we were there for 3 years. And did a lot of things very similar to what we do at Element Church, as far as community events and stuff like that. But then when the founding pastor of Element, Rich Jones, took a position in Philadelphia, then I can't talk today. The people who remained at Element Church were like, hey, you know what? We need a new pastor. Erik knows our church. He's been a part of it before. He knows kind of our DNA. And so we kind of went back and forth on that. I actually at first was like, no, because I was really happy with what I was doing. And we actually ended up taking the two churches and putting them together a little more than a year ago, last year in January. And that's how I ended up in Millvale from Lawrenceville. I know Pittsburghers aren't supposed to cross rivers, but we did it anyway. And so did the people who were a part of Mars Hill. And so we joined together into one church to really kind of because we had very similar DNA, to keep moving forward in serving and loving this community.
Very cool. Now, I know with Element, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a specific denomination. Is that correct, or how does that
Yes
work?
and no.
Yes and
we're part of the Assemblies of God. The Assemblies of God is more a fellowship of churches than it is what you would think of as a denomination. It's very loose knit. So we're a part of a bigger group of churches, but we're still technically a non-denominational church because we're not a part of a denomination. We're also a part of a group of churches out of Allison Park Church, which is up in Allison Park, which is called Reach Northeast, which is a group of churches starting new churches in urban areas in the Northeast.
Very cool. So what can we expect from the podcast going forward?
So we started it up with a series that we did a couple of months ago called Stay Positive, which was one that was a lot of fun, talking about like, hey, let's talk about optimism and being encouraging and those sort of things. So we're starting there, and then the next series that we're going to jump into is the one that we actually started this Easter called Simple. Because in a lot of our lives are super busy. They're super complex. Like if you ask anybody, like, "Hey, how you doing?" They're like, "I'm busy." And so we like saying, "Hey, well, what does it look like in a spiritual life if we try to take our lives and make them more simple?" And so we were talking about things like Easter. We talked about our belief in the resurrection of Jesus. Then we talked about community life and what does it look like to have simple community. Last week we talked about family. Because families, man, you want to talk about complex and crazy and busy and weird. That's family. So we talked about that, and then next week we're going to talk about prayer and how prayer can be a very simple thing that we sometimes try to make very complex.
Yeah, that is a true statement. People do try to it's a piety almost approving to yourself, maybe that.
Yeah, can be.
Yeah, that you're doing it right or whatever. So now, when are your services if people want to stop out and check it out?
Our services are at 10:30 every Sunday. And like I said, we're in Millvale. We're neighbors if you know where River's Edge is. But if not, we are right smack dab in the middle where Grant and North Avenue meet. And if you get in that area, you can't miss us.
They have a nicer sign than we do. They have a nice sign. Their sign changes colors and is really cool. And our sign was just taken down because the window broke. So now you can't even find us.
Well, it takes time to get there. Our first sign on that building was just a banner that somebody staple gunned up. So
ours was literally just a poster that was just taped with Scotch tape to a window that recently a cinder block went through or something through construction. So
construction's
so right
no fun.
Yeah, we're signless. Actually, you know what? It is fun in a way though, because it's been fun in this building because it's bringing new life to the place, and we've got a neighbor next door. So as much as it can be challenging at times, it's been nice because I think it's revitalizing this entire complex with Ton Pottery, which actually moved from Lawrenceville as well.
We're seeing a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
As Lawrenceville has gotten monstrously expensive, people are looking for lively communities that they can put businesses into that's going to be more sustainable for them. And I think Millvale has a really cool opportunity in that right now because you can actually afford to rent something here.
And I'm hoping it stays that way. I know they're really trying to keep it a place where people can afford to live if they've already been here, and try to allow current businesses to be able to maintain their business and stay here in Millvale, which is important too.
And we've got a lot of great local businesses. Yeah,
we do, really. And if you want to check that out, you can come out this 5th and 6th for the Millvale May Days. They're going to have a shop crawl, horse-drawn carriages, and more all throughout the town. You can follow BAM, the Business Association of Millvale, at BAM 15209. So,
absolutely.
Eric?
And you get flower seeds.
You do,
I think that's worth mentioning, is that there's just every business has tons of flower seeds. So every business you go to, you get some seeds, and then you can plant something beautiful at your house.
Absolutely. And then you can also order a Frank's Pizza. I mentioned the River's Edge, and get 10% off an order of $10 or more. Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the Element Church podcast. You can hear it every morning, 9 a.m. here at riversedgepgh.com. And we'll be moving everything around right after the Millvale Music Festival, May 13th, so stay tuned for show updates. But this show will be my show, and Eric's show will be 2 shows that will not be moved. But stay tuned. We're going to be moving, eventually, Fishing Without Bait right afterwards, so that'll be at 10 a.m. All at Pittsburgh's local music radio station, The River's Edge.